triggering for anybody experiencing gambling-related harm. Please watch cautiously. We speak from our experiences only. Please seek professional help for a gambling addiction.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina, and I haven't placed a bet since March of 2021.
And I'm Brian, and I haven't placed a bet since July of 2014. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Brian.
Christina, I went to CVS this week to get a prescription filled, and it wasn't ready, so I had to walk around CVS and entertain myself for a few minutes. So I was looking at the gift card area. And in the gift card area, there were DraftKings gift cards. And I thought, oh, maybe it's just for the fantasy. Nope, you can use it for the sports book. And so I have two gripes with this. Number one is I could easily hide my gambling with a gift card. Easily, because now it just says CVS on my credit card for $25. Number two is when I had a credit card when I was gambling, I could only get so much cash off that credit card. And then the rest of the credit card would at least, I know, be there for things like food and gas and necessities. But now I could use that other half of the gift card the other half of the credit card to gamble by buying gift cards. And that is a scary thought to me. Have you encountered these gift cards?
I have. I was at the, I don't know if you've been to the South, but Dollar Generals are on every corner. And I was in there the other day and saw them. And I was like, oh, wow. And honestly, in all my years of going in there and gambling, I've never seen anything like that. And so it was, and now that I guess I recognize everything as far as the gambling things go, it really did surprise me. And I'm really concerned. So, because they are trying to pass a bill for sports betting here in Oklahoma. And it's just another thing to be concerned about when it comes to that.
Yeah. And I was just wandering around a CVS, and all of a sudden I got to think about gambling again in a CVS. So what's
very
that?
True. And isn't that how most like, I've heard so many stories that they would buy the gift cards. That's how that they would hide it. And from like their wives, and there's like a lot of men would do that, or I guess women who sports bet, but just offering like that, making it that easily available. Is absolutely scary, Brian.
Yeah. Anyways, that was my eye rolling gripe this week. I wanted to get that out of my system. I thought the other day, I even thought like, I would just want to buy it, give it to my wife and let her use it. And I want to see how it works. But then I thought that's a step too far for me. So I didn't do that, luckily.
That would have put money in their pocket, right?
Yeah.
In DraftKings pocket.
I don't need to do that. We have an awesome guest this week. Jody Bechtold, the CEO of the Better Institute, as well as the co-author of the Gambling Disorder Treatment Handbook, along with Dr. Alyssa Wilson. Jody, thank you for doing this. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me today.
It's nice to do this on video and not just in podcast form.
This is fun. Yeah, I appreciate it. And this is a great other channel that you guys have that I love to use as a resource with my clients. So keep doing what you're doing. This is wonderful.
We only get to keep doing it because people like yourself are so nice to give us your time. Would you tell us all about the Better Institute and how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. So it's located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a group practice. I'm the CEO, but I have a co-founder, Rob Bumbacco, and he's actually way back, a former student of mine. So we're both licensed clinical social workers, and I tease him sometimes that he's my succession plan. When I eventually retire, he'll be taking over. We decided to kind of rebrand. It's always been a private practice of mine since like 2003, but then we rebranded in 2018, called it the Better Institute, and said, how can we bring on more clinicians and really serve as many people as possible in the best ways possible? And what's come from it is there's 7 of us now, and all of us have addictions background. And many of us are trained and certified in gambling addiction treatment. And what ultimately happens is one person comes in for help, and we end up treating the whole family. Sometimes the partner or spouse goes to one of the other clinicians. Then they do relationship counseling or family counseling. So it's turned into an amazing an amazing journey of, being able to help people. We work with all kinds of disorders as well, but really my focus is very much gambling addiction and, helping the family members as well, and helping the relationship or the marriage or whatever, the whole family. So it just keeps going. It's been great.
And that's located in the state of Pennsylvania. So you treat everyone in the state of Pennsylvania?
We do. Yeah.
Just in case anybody's watching, they're like, oh, that sounds fantastic. I want to do that,
Yeah.
But got to be in the state of Pennsylvania.
You do. A couple of us are licensed in some other states, New Jersey, things like that. Just we're still feeling our way about in terms of with COVID and, getting access. But I also am looking more at what are the states that maybe have what I call a behavioral health desert. And I know, Christina, we talked briefly about that on the podcast. It's one thing to be a clinician. It's another thing to be a clinician that's trained and has experience in gambling disorder. And, the number starts to get really small in some states. So trying to think about which states would benefit, because you can do it by video, insurance companies are willing to pay for that. What doesn't tend to translate is when there's state funding to pay for treatment, they're really looking for providers that are within their state. So the complexities of being the United States with 50 states, trying to figure all that out.
Since I like to focus on, this is just my question, since I like to focus on women struggling with gambling harm, have you seen an uptick in women coming in and seeking help for gambling harm?
Yeah. So in Pennsylvania, we have some of the most forms of gambling, both in person and online, available. So, we're one of the first 4 states that did the sports betting and online. I just can't believe all the different ways that people can gamble. And all of that was available before the pandemic. Okay. So you can really appreciate what happened during the pandemic and all the commercials. A lot of other advertisers were kind of pulling back their advertising dollars during the pandemic, and the gambling operators came in and said, here we go. And so you could literally watch TV, and 2, if not all 3 of the commercials can be gambling related right now in Pennsylvania. So I say that because what happened for me is that I saw an uptick in the younger male sports bettor during COVID that hasn't really gone away. And so I haven't seen as many women, and I don't know if they're still hiding their gambling because you can do it on a smartphone, if they're finding other community connections and not going the professional direction. But I'm not saying that it's not an issue. It's just that I'm not seeing it in my practice.
Yeah, I can probably very much confirm that there are a lot of them that just still aren't seeking help, still aren't feeling safe to seek help because of maybe, the household runs off of them, and it's just taking that time to
Right.
for yourself to get the help. And that kind of brings me into my next question about how important a tool therapy is for recovery.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. I always think that some sort of 12-step or peer support is really, really important early and lifelong. And so I think that it's the partnership of that with professional help that is what makes, changes people's lives for the better, for the long term. Right. And I really, so even in my earlier days of learning more about gambling disorder, I would go to a GA meeting and the gentleman would introduce me and people would kind of look at me and he would say, she needs us and we need her. And it was, it was really kind of highlighting that we're supposed to do this together. And that working with someone like me isn't lifelong. And that's where your peer or self-support, all of that is there to be lifelong. So I think sometimes people mix that or it's misunderstood But when you go to someone like me, you get to work on more than just the gambling disorder. You get to understand how it affects other areas of your life. You get to understand how it came into your life, and you get to really work on some of those other areas. So some people have what I call a gambling solution, not a gambling problem. And what I mean by that is that they have been avoiding something else in their life, and they're using gambling to avoid it. And when they come in for help, we can actually problem solve that thing they've been avoiding once and for all. And then gambling doesn't have to take such a large part of their over their life. Other people have a gambling problem. We know genetically there's a predisposition, there's a vulnerability, and it doesn't matter the season, the temperature outside, the day on the calendar, like nothing good's going to come from gambling for them. And they probably have some other addictive tendencies or features and traits, or, with alcohol or something like that. And so, that's kind of how I conceptualize for some a gambling problem versus a gambling solution. And it helps for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I just visualized that too. And I thought, very interesting. One of the most common things I hear in the recovery is that gambling is a symptom of a problem. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think for me, that was very much the case. Or maybe I'm a hybrid. I'm not sure. But I think for me, it was very much the symptom of a problem, because I could list them all. But as far as it's interesting that you say that therapy is a tool early on in recovery, and that you do need, connection, we all know is the key to recovery. And I hear so many people say, well, I don't want to be in recovery for the rest of my life. And I think they term it as in therapy, meetings constantly, just this constant, because when you're in early recovery, it's all about trying to get on solid ground, trying to get things in some type of order. But as you tend to go on, you have to find a balance between complacency and recovery. And I think therapy can be a tool that's used throughout your life. It doesn't have to be a tool you use your whole life, but it can be a tool that you like. Do you see people come to you maybe every few years as things change?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that that's what is so important about, when we get into this profession, it really is our calling, because we're going to stay in this profession. We're not going to we might change where we work, but we don't change the work we do. And so then people can follow it, if you change where, who you work for or something like that. I've had clients come back years later, and it might be the same issue. Okay, now I'm ready to really work on it. Or it might be something totally different. And I always tell people, I'm always here. My door's always open. I'm not going anywhere. I always dispel the myth of Hollywood too. You don't come and see me and lay on a couch and have me go, and how does that make you feel? Over and over again, right? You also don't come and see me week after week after week after week at exactly 11 o'clock every Tuesday or whatever. I don't do that either. And I've found that because you've got to get those tools early, and then you've got to be practicing them and coming back and saying, here's how it's working. Here's where I'm struggling. And so I'll say to people, I want you as my active client for at least a year, because I want to go through all the calendar, all the anniversary dates of whatever is going on in your life, get you through, March Madness, get you through the Super Bowl, whatever. And then we'll do tune-ups whenever you need, or once a month, or I have some people that come once every 3 months. Right. And so it's so individualized, but I try and dispel the myth of Hollywood right away.
Jody, can you define a gambling disorder as a specific diagnosis? Because I know there's people, and I talk to them, they don't like the term problem gambling, so they just use gambling disorder. But a gambling disorder is a specific diagnosis, correct?
It is. Yeah, gambling disorder is actually the clinical term, where problem gambling is more of kind of layman's terms, or when you also would call yourself a compulsive gambler. That's more of a 12-step term. And so gambling disorder is specific to a diagnosis, and it was renamed from before it was called pathological gambling. And they renamed it to gambling disorder a few years ago when the newest DSM came out, which is a diagnostic and statistical manual. I know that's a mouthful. So gambling, what's frustrating is when we think about substance use disorders, we kind of have substance use, substance abuse, and then substance dependence. And you feel that, that progression in those terms. Someone uses, someone abuses, and then someone's dependent. We don't have that for gambling disorder. We don't have gambling abuse and then gambling dependence. All we have is one disorder, gambling disorder. And so people have, there's 9 criteria, and when you meet 4 or more, then you qualify for that diagnosis. So what we look at is if someone comes in and they're under 4, then I view that as problematic, but not the full disorder. So I know that some of that's kind of clinical technical terms, but does that make sense in terms of like understanding the progression?
Yes,
absolutely.
And the downside is you have to almost give someone gambling disorder diagnosis if you're going to be using what we call commercial or third-party reimbursement, because there's no gambling abuse. So there's just one, right? And so oftentimes as a clinician, we have to really make sure, do they really meet criteria? Do they meet criteria for a different disorder while we're also treating the gambling? So there's a lot that would go into the full evaluation and assessment, because you don't give that disorder, that diagnosis lightly. You don't just slap it on somewhere, it's really important to make sure somebody meets that criteria, and it's only valid for 12 months. So Brian, you have you're in recovery for gambling, but you wouldn't meet criteria for a gambling disorder right now because you haven't gambled, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you could come into therapy, but you would not get that diagnosis. You would have a different diagnosis depending on what your reason for coming in.
Do you think that people will then think, if they don't get that diagnosis, that, then they're okay to gamble because they don't have a gambling disorder?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we could say that about, depression or anxiety too. You could go, 2 years without a depressive episode, and then I don't have depression. I'm fine. So you could say it about any of that. And, it's very unfortunate because it's that whole labeling, that giving a diagnosis and labeling in order to get help. What if we just wanted to get help? What if we just wanted to have that professional that was our safe place to go and process anything we wanted to at any time, like a work issue, a difficult boss, a neighbor that's not friendly, who knows? What if you had that safe place to go? Why do we have to give them a label?
Absolutely. I love the thought of that. And I think, just talking about this and bringing it to light, like, it's okay to get help, even if you think that your issue or your problem isn't as severe as what you've heard other people's. Don't minimize what you're going through. Seek the help, because there are people ready to just walk you through it. Do you see a lot of people coming in that don't meet the criteria, that you see them in that really early stage? And is it helpful? Like, are you able to help keep them from going into the criteria stage?
Yeah. Again, it's hard to generalize. So I can only talk about, my specific work. I'm sure that a lot of other professionals might have a completely different answer based on what they see. I don't really see too many people coming in the early stages, right? And that's because we totally know about control. And that control keeps people away until they're out of control. Then they come in for professional help as well as, self-support. And one of my goals is to get them to surrender so that they can have control of their life again. And it's just this play back and forth with the control and the surrender and how it shows up. So it is unfortunate that most people will seek help, professional help, when their lives are out of control.
Very much so. What I've seen too, a lot of people going into therapy sessions, and I did this, I'm very much guilty of this, especially with the doctor who was overseeing my depression medication. I was not honest about my gambling addiction. She did not know that I had a gambling addiction. And she put me on a really high dose of a medication that has been known to cause issues in that department. And had I been honest with her before, maybe my gambling wouldn't have been as bad, because 2018 was my worst year. And I was on that really high dose of medicine. And so I see too, a lot of women that go to therapy twice a month and do not talk about their gambling because they feel like they're going to be judged by their therapist. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I mean, one of the criteria in gambling disorder is lies to family, therapist, friends, whatever. Right. So you have to appreciate that people are going to come in and they're not going to tell you everything. And you have to put yourself in that same position and say, if you were going to go when you were feeling really down and you were going to just be completely honest about everything, it's just a human behavior or a human tendency not to share everything right away. And so in therapy, it's really important to have that therapeutic alliance and really know that the therapist is there for you. And I'm telling you, not every therapist is right for every client. And I'll tell people that, like, let's have a first session. Let's make sure you feel comfortable. It's a good fit. If it's not, I'll help you find someone else. And, when we then talk about gambling and it's like, no, I finally found you. Because you know that it's like, well, I still want to make sure this is a good fit, because if you can't be honest in therapy, you're then not fully honest with yourself. Right. But we do expect it. And I'll say, like, please just be as honest as possible with me. It's the only way I can help you. And I'm not going to kick you out if you tell me you relapse. We're just going to problem solve what happened and how do we close more doors so that you have a better opportunity to not let it happen again. And when people come in and they're like, yeah, I relapsed, it's my response that will either shame them or give them hope right there. And
Absolutely.
So it's my goal to make sure that I'm giving them hope and we got this. And thank you for, coming back and because it could keep some people from even returning for another appointment, if they're lying and they're feeling the shame. So, there's just so much to attend to in therapy, and as a therapist to be there for that person and know that it can be, some of the darkest times of their lives. And so the lying we do expect. Now, team that up with the medication. The more we can talk about medication and keep talking about it, it's going to be so helpful. I'm seeing it more and more where people are coming in and they're talking about a gambling episode or, that was just they couldn't understand it. And I said, are you on Abilify? And they're like, yeah. Right. Are you, or I have one person who actually has Parkinson's, and you have to be on certain medication for that, depending on the shakes, the tremors, what have you. That's the same reason, it's a dopamine agonist, and the potential side effect is excessive gambling. What I've seen is the excessive gambling is happening to someone who had been gambling before. So it doesn't take someone who never gambles and all of a sudden makes them this compulsive gambler, right? It usually is someone who has been gambling and then it looks like gambling on steroids. And they're like, how did this happen all of a sudden? Oh, it's the progression. I'm like, no, it's the medication hitting that part of the brain. So then getting off the medication, we see that gambling behavior drop pretty significantly. Right. But the gambling was still there. So then I approached that, like, we should probably look at this, and you probably shouldn't gamble as an activity, as a form of entertainment, because your brain's already vulnerable.
Yeah.
Abilify is huge. It's terrible.
I was gambling before And then they put me on, and my medication was Effexor. So I just want to put that out there in case anybody is that. But I just want to say real quick, I know Brian has a question. I did tell my doctor, and she knows now. And when I got off of it in early 19, my gambling, like it was still bad, and it was bad before the medication. But it was not even a fraction of what it had been the year that I was on that high dose medication. So I just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's helpful. So it's the dopamine agonist that they have proven over and over and over again will cause compulsive behaviors. Gambling's the easiest one to measure. It could cause compulsive shopping, compulsive sex, anything that's compulsive. So the dopamine agonist is in the Parkinson's medication. It's also in restless leg syndrome medication. And that was another one. How restless are you when you're trying to stop gambling? I'm going to go to my doctor and say, I'm really restless. Let me put you on restless leg syndrome medication. And then what's happening, right? Then it's a cycle. And then the Abilify is the newest one. That's an antipsychotic. I don't want to scare people by that. It usually is teamed up with another medication for effective treatment, getting someone in that effective therapeutic range. And it's got FDA warnings about it. But the dopamine agonist of Mirapex for restless leg syndrome, you can see the warning is black as can be in writing, may cause excessive gambling. So yeah, it's really important to talk about medications and ask those questions. And I'm training therapists all the time. Are you asking about medications the first time you meet someone?
Well, okay, I have two comments. And the first one is, guess who's on Abilify?
Wow.
That is so many months ago. And you know this, Jody, because you reached out afterwards. I had a mental health crisis. I was suicidal. I was inpatient for 2 weeks, and you were very kind to reach out, and I really appreciated that. But in the hospital, and this speaks to the honesty that you mentioned earlier within therapy, it was in the hospital where I realized, well, I'm here. If I'm going to get help, I need to give them everything they need, and they need me to be as honest as possible, even if it embarrasses me, even if it makes me feel less than. I need to tell them all this, because then they're going to fix that for me. They're going to fix that through medication and therapy. And that is what happened. I was able to be as honest as I could be. Yeah. And so that continues today with my therapist, where that is my safe space, where I get to go in there and I can say anything to her.
Yep.
Anything without judgment. She will give me feedback. I even lied to her one week, told her I couldn't come in because I had a sick child. It was a lie. It was a straight lie. And I felt guilty about it. I didn't get something done. I procrastinated on a project. And it was like I was in school again, where I was like, I can't go to school today because I didn't get this project done. I had procrastinated. And so I didn't go to therapy because I didn't get this project done. And I lied to her. And I went to I go to group therapy as well because of the suicidal thoughts. And I went in there and I said, I lied to my therapist. And they said, you have to tell her. And I went back to my therapist and I said, I'm so sorry, but I lied to you last week.
And what was her response?
And she was gracious. She said, thank you for telling me, let's explore why you lied. And I said, because I felt like I was back in school again, and I missed a project. And instead of just telling you that, I had to lie with what was an easy excuse for me. And this is behavior I've done before when I was younger, of why are you late to work? And it's always a lie. It was a constant lie. It wasn't because I was out gambling all night long and I'm tired. It was, I hit my alarm clock accidentally and knocked it off the table. It was always some extravagant lie about the simplest thing.
Right.
I remember I self-harmed at one point when I was 24, and I went to work and I had this bruise on my face, and it was for me. I had punched myself plenty of times. And they said, what happened? And I said, we were messing around and I tripped over and hit my head on the couch. Like, again, this extravagant lie. But what am I going to tell them? That I self-harmed? Yeah, right. Which, again, I guess I kind of wish I would have, because maybe I would have gone through all this a lot earlier in life and not had to deal with it now. But in going through the mental health crisis, they put me on medication for depression, anxiety. One of those medications was Abilify, to work in partnership with the antidepressants, Lexapro. And so when they said the same thing, antipsychotic, and I went, oh,
Right.
What? And no. It's to boost the Alexa Pro. And I remembered hearing about Abilify and gambling. And I thought, boy, that sounds familiar. Sounds like something. So after I was on it for a while, I talked to my APRN who was prescribing it. And I said, listen, I gambled and I know that this can cause compulsive behaviors. What should I do? And she said, okay, let's try and take you off of it. So we weaned down. I got off of it. Next thing I know, I had suicidal thoughts again. Mm-hmm. And I shared that with the people I was supposed to share that with, again, honesty. And I shared that in my home, in my therapist, in my group. Mm-hmm. And the APRN said, I think we need to put you back on it because that took place while you weren't on it. So let's get you back on it and let's just make sure we pay attention to the gambling or compulsive behavior. So that's what I'm doing currently.
I'm so glad you shared that because it really just shows how individual people need to be managed. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you can't just straight up say, no, you can't be on it. It's Abilify. It causes excessive gambling. Get off of it. Like, no, you can't. So you have your team of people monitoring that and keeping, taking care of that. And I mean, I think that's just so important for people to understand because of complete honesty, being willing to ask for help, you're getting the most individualized care possible.
Yeah. I mean, they can't help me if I'm not honest.
Right.
And all they're there is to help. And it's just once you get past that, I can just say anything to this person, such a benefit. Mm-hmm. It's such a benefit to be able to, I go in there and I pour everything out each and every week. And it's all stuff that for years I just keep inside and it bounces around in my head. And that's what got me to where I was suicidal. And so to be able to get all that out, it's just I have a much calmer life now because I've shared it and I know how to deal with these thoughts and these, my worries and anxiety really.
Right. I've said to people, it's okay. Let it out. I promise, even if you spill out all over the floor, I can put you back together again before the hour's up. And it's, okay. Just kind of hearing that. I promise I can put you back together again. Because sometimes people are like I'm doing this on my lunch hour and you want me to share what? I won't be able to go back to work at the, after this session.
I think that's another reason why it's so imperative to find the right connection with your therapist, mm-hmm. to feel that comfortable, to feel that safe. And so it's like, I think we talked about this on the podcast, Jody, like you mentioned it earlier. It's you interview them, mm-hmm. you interview each other and make sure that it's a team that's going to work. And that's so imperative, but again, therapy can be such an amazing tool.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your book, Dr. Alyssa Wilson, and why you wrote it and what you hope that it does for the community.
We'd started out, I never thought I would ever write a book. And Brian, we always joked about how Alyssa helped with all the citations because I don't like to do citations, right, for the research part of it. But it's more than that. We really looked at over, the span of the last 10 years with the change in the DSM, like we talked about, from pathological gambling to gambling disorder. What are the books that are out there to train clinicians, to help clinicians? And there are some really good books out there. There's a lot with research. How do you apply that research in practice? There's some straight up research, but there really wasn't a book for clinicians. If you could only buy one book this year, right, what would the book be? And we wanted it at a certain price point, and we wanted it to be very action oriented of here's what you do. And this is what you do in a session. This is the terminology. This is what have you. And we launched it at just the right time because there wasn't another book just for clinicians. There's a couple other ones that have a lot of research, but the price point was over $100. And even just recently, I was talking with somebody who's doing a training, and they said it would be great if we found a book, kind of like a textbook, to complement the course, but we can't put too much on students. And I said, I'm not trying to promote my book, but I'm trying to promote my book, right? The whole reason we wrote it. And I just said, you can check it out, but the price point's $40. And he went, $40? That's amazing. That's wonderful. So it was designed to do that. We don't We didn't do it to make money off of a book. We did it because the time was now. And I actually was just thinking recently, I want to do version 2 soon, edition 2, because there's so much that is continuously changing, and all this stuff with sports betting and online, that we could do another version already. And it only came out last March. So it was exciting to do that. And people have fully embraced it. I mean, I'm even presenting for the Kentucky, annual conference. They bought books for everyone that is coming to the conference. It was just amazing, so it's really been very well received. And I'm just really proud that I got to say I wrote a book. It's kind of cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah. But it is designed for clinicians. And I get asked all the time, is this a book for people with a gambling disorder? So we need to write one. We need to find somebody needs to watch this episode and say, I'll help write it. And what should it say? Right. Because having that lived experience, and we call it bibliotherapy. In therapy, we recommend books to read or listen to. What are the ones we have for gambling? There's a couple, but what are the go-tos? Christina, what's the most relevant autobiography for female gamblers today?
The Girl Gambler by Stacey Goodwin. And she's based out of the UK. I remember reading her book, and just like, I knew exactly what she was going to do next. I was reading it. I'm like, right. Girl, don't do it. Don't do it. You did it. Cause it's like that's exactly, I knew exactly what she was going to do. I knew those emotions so deeply. And and there are a few others, I think, that are good, but that one's definitely the one I connected with the most.
Okay.
And I think I see that a lot in the communities too.
And what's one for younger male sports bettors?
You got me on that. I was going to say Arnie Wexler. All bets are off.
And that's a good point, right?
Yeah.
It's a gap in being relatable. And so every generation and gender or type of gambling needs to be relatable. And that's why I think your podcast and your videos are so successful, and so many people are absorbing them, because it's a version of an audiobook. And it's very relatable, and you can do it in small chunks, so you get your small dose every day or every week. And that's why I'm just so glad you guys are doing all this stuff, because it just makes it so much easier for the work that I do to help people outside the hour continue to get better.
I'm just glad Christina agreed to do the video. I've been dying to do this for a long time. And Christina's jumped on board. Right? Yeah, I've been wanting to do that too.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my, again, she's new, but she's not new. She's an old soul in this world, but we still are coming up to a year in March for Christina. And to be able to be this honest this early is so helpful to so many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, it was, I hid too long. And I say that all the time. Anybody who's listened to me knows that I didn't grow as a person when I was gambling. And so everything that comes my way that can help me grow as a person, and doing something like this, hearing these stories, having these conversations, is absolutely amazing. To have a friend like Brian this far into recovery, and so many others. And it's just all changed my life. And I know that feeling of like, you feel like your life will never change. Like you feel like this addiction, this feeling is going to be your life for the rest of your life. And it can absolutely change. It can absolutely change. You can be a year in recovery and have a wonderful community around you. You can be doing the things that you want to do. And for me, that's helping others.
You could be doing things that you never thought you'd be doing.
Absolutely. Right? People don't understand that I am probably one of the most awkward, introverted people you will ever meet. And well, they may understand, but it's just, doing something like this and just reaching out. Like just reaching out to the people that I've reached out to. Like I just cold called people like, hey, will you come on my podcast? And by doing so, it was the ripple effect, and all the people that we meet in this community, and how like this community comes together to do wonderful things that hopefully will help so many, that I know will help so many down the road.
I recently got an email from a female asking for help, pretty, difficult situation. And I was able to determine I'm not licensed in the state that she needs help. And so I replied back and I said, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm not able to help you because I'm not licensed in your state. Here is a number, here's a help line. But it was, at 10:30 at night, right? And I said, and please check out the Broke Girls Society podcast now. Because it was kind of like, I have something that I can connect you with right now. When you finally send an email, that's a pretty open moment to say, I'm ready. And then if you get met with call back at 9:00 tomorrow morning, kind of thing, like what else is there? And so being able to use this type of medium and say, here, go here right now. It'll speak to you. And I said, please listen to this now so that you really do know you're not alone.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. I mean, seriously, to give it these kinds of resources is really what makes a difference with what I do in that hour and what people are able to do outside of that hour until the next hour with me, right? It's really important.
Jody, I wanted to ask you about the percentage of clinicians who are gambling specific and that's lacking. Yeah. Have you seen that change? Are more being trained with gambling in your view? Because I know that, in states, we still get emails where people are like, oh, my therapist wasn't gambling specific.
Right. Right.
In which my response is always, well, until you find one who is, stay with one and at least talk. But the gambling, can you talk about being gambling specific when having a client, but also is that changing? Are we getting more?
I don't know if we're getting more because I'm more involved on the certification side in my volunteer role with the board of International Gambling Counselor Certification Board, that big mouthful of IGCCB. We do know that more and more people are getting training, but it takes a long time to go through a full certification. So I might not see the numbers go up for over a year, but that doesn't mean they're not actively working with individuals with gambling disorders and practicing the things that they've been learning and being under someone's supervision. But I will tell you, just take mental health, take gambling out of it. Mental health alone, the demand for mental health services will always be more than the providers to give it. The demand is always going to be more than the supply, which is why you see so many apps coming out and, so many other tech plays. And I don't find them that as competition. I don't view it as something that's unhelpful. I'm like, there's not enough of us. And the research shows that it's not always as effective depending on where you are in your stage of asking for help. Someone with social anxiety in college might find an app that gets them all the right information and teaches them what to do, that they overcome, never get rid of social anxiety, but they overcome it enough to really feel like they are in society and really enjoying life. And they could have done that with an app instead of waiting to see someone like me. So the demand is always going to be more than the supply. So then you add gambling disorder specific, that number is going to be much smaller. And so it is not going to even come close to matching the exponential growth of legalized gambling that we have. Right. So I'm sorry to be telling you a sad story, but that's partly why I'm saying we have to be creative about how we go out and get help. Thank goodness COVID happened because it forced the whole clinical profession to have to accept video. I was already doing lots of video, so I can work with people across the state. I'll never see their shoes. I'll never know how tall they are, right? But I'm going to be able to help them through video. And so that's one way that we're breaking down kind of those deserts. But we've got to do more. People have to learn more about gambling disorder. Universities. Look at universities. They all have some elective course in addiction. Whether you're a counseling degree, social work degree, doesn't matter. There's an elective course. You don't have to take it. It's not mandatory. And it's about addiction. Go find how many of those are talking about problem gambling. Not many. And yet gambling is outpacing the drug and alcohol expansion in the country, right? So we have this opportunity to get the word out to everyone that's in college. If universities would actually say, we also have to be talking about this. I know you're looking at me, Brian, like that was not the answer you were hoping for.
Why? I had a clinician on named Betsy Byler who does a podcast, and she had reached out because she said, I'm a trained clinician. I know nothing about gambling. We didn't learn about gambling in my classes.
Right.
I know nothing. And so we did a podcast together, and she was great, but I was just shocked that she didn't learn anything about gambling addiction specifically in her training.
Yep.
And that is, it's a bummer.
And why universities the universities move slow. Not trying to say anything negative about universities, but they move slow. Their time zones are last semester, this semester, and next semester. And it's like, come on, you got to get. So I actually have a gentleman that reached out to me from a university in, I'll get it wrong. Let's just say up north.
Okay.
And he is using our textbook, our book, to complement the class. And I was like so humbled by that. And I said, let me guest speak for you anytime. And so I'm actually next week going to be a guest speaker in his class. And I'm just like, and he has 15 students in the class. I mean, that's 15 more people.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Amazing. So it just takes one, and then it takes one, and then it takes one. And all of a sudden we can have this rippling effect.
Wow. Well, Jody, it has been a real pleasure to have you on the video show on the Bet Free Life. You've been on both the podcasts. We've talked, we've chatted, and now we get to see you while we talk to you. And this has been a real wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
This has been great. I appreciate it. Thanks for the questions you asked, and please keep doing what you guys are doing. It is so helpful. Appreciate it. And I appreciate you.
I can't speak for Brian, but I think we plan on it.
Yes, we do plan on it. It's been surprisingly, I don't want to say easy, but it's been easy to do this video, to just transfer over and do video. And we try to make it better each week. Each week we try to up the ante. That's the wrong term to use. Each week we try to make the show better and, try to get people to be able to, because it's YouTube, people tune in and out. And so we want to make sure we get people to watch the whole thing. So we try to make it entertaining the whole way through, and to provide hope and, just let people know that it's going to be okay. And you've been a big part of that today.
Thank you. And you mentioned the word better several times, and that's why we called our group practice the Better Institute. It's where you go to get better. It's not about being the best. It's about getting better.
Well, Jody Bechtold, the book is The Gambling Disorder Treatment Handbook, written with Dr. Alyssa Wilson. You can find it on Amazon if you are interested. We'll put a link in the show notes. For Christina, I'm Brian. This is the Bet Free Life. Bam! Talking helps.